If you've been scrolling through endless videos, reading spec sheets, and still feel like you're standing in a hardware aisle with a dozen jointers staring back at you, you're not alone. The biggest question most of us face is, will this machine actually make my life easier, or am I just adding another bulky piece of metal to the shop? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review, I'm going to break down why the Powermatic 8-inch Parallelogram jointer might finally give you that clear answer, and help you decide whether it's a smart buy for your setup or a nice-to-have you can safely skip. First off, let's talk about the hesitation that keeps most woodworkers up at night. The fear of overpaying for a machine that sounds impressive on paper but ends up being a pain to use daily. Jointers sit at the heart of any shop that turns rough lumber into finished panels, and a bad one can chew up time, cause tear out, or even ruin a board you spend hours prepping. On the flip side, a well-chosen jointer can turn a chaotic stack of 24s into perfectly flat, square edges in minutes, freeing you up for the more creative part of the project. The Powermatic PJ882 tries to balance those two worlds by offering a blend of industrial-grade features and a footprint that still fits in a serious hobbyist garage. The first thing I noticed when the machine arrived was the straight knife cutter head. Unlike a traditional helical cutter head, the straight knives are 3 high-speed steel blades that bite into the wood in a clean, almost surgical way. In practice, that means when you feed a piece of pine or a tougher maple, you get a uniform surface without the chatter you sometimes hear on cheaper models. The knives stay sharp longer because HSS handles heat better, so you're not swapping out blades after every weekend project. If you're the kind of woodworker who runs a lot of edge jointing for cabinets or builds tables that need perfectly square seams, that consistency pays off in less sanding and tighter glue joints. Now, the table surface is an 8-inch by 82-inch cast iron slab that's precision ground. In real-world terms, it gives you room to handle longer boards without constantly shuffling them under the cutter head. I've used it to joint a 6-foot piece of reclaimed lumber that I was planning to turn into a tabletop. The extra length meant I could keep the board flat the whole way through, which is a huge time saver compared to a smaller 6-inch machine that forces you to stop, readjust, and risk a misalignment at the seam. The cast iron also absorbs vibration, so the feed feels smoother, which reduces fatigue when you're doing a batch of 20-plus boards. What really sets the PJ882 apart is the parallelogram design. The whole idea is to keep the fence and the table as close to the cutter head as possible, which minimizes the amount of material you lose on each pass. The closer proximity also means you get a deeper cut in a single pass without the machine struggling. In my shop, that translates to being able to take an inch-deep cut on a dense hardwood without having to make multiple shallow passes. The trade-off, however, is that the adjustment mechanism isn't a simple knob you turn and walk away from. The patented hand wheel with a worm gear system gives you micro-fine control over fence tilting, which is fantastic when you need a perfect 90-degree angle, but it does take a few seconds to get used to the feel. If you're accustomed to the quick-release levers on budget models, expect a short learning curve. One practical advantage you'll notice right away is the high mount switch. It's positioned up near the cutter head where your hand naturally rests while you're feeding material. That placement isn't just a convenience, it's a safety feature. You can cut power with a single thumb without having to reach down and potentially expose your fingers to the blade. In a busy shop where you might have both a table saw and a jointer running simultaneously, that little ergonomic detail can prevent a lot of awkward moments. Of course, no machine is without its downsides. The 2-horsepower motor is respectable for most residential and small commercial scenarios, but if you're planning to joint large, dense hardwoods day in and day out, you might feel the motor working a bit harder than you'd like. It doesn't stall, but you'll notice a slight dip in speed on the toughest cuts, which means you may need to give it a moment to recover before the next board. Another consideration is the power requirement. The PJ882 runs on 230V single-phase. That's fine if you already have a shop-grade outlet, but many home garages are wired for 120V. Upgrading your electrical service adds extra cost and a bit of hassle, something you have to factor in before you click Add to Cart. Weight and size are also hidden trade-offs. The cast iron table and sturdy frame give the machine a solid, immovable feel, great for precision, but not great for a shop that needs to move equipment around frequently.